Hey everyone, this is Nick LaRue from FilmSnobbery, and I am here today, a little bit of a different day on FilmSnobbery Live. This is, normally we have filmmakers on, screenwriters, stuff like that. Today we have an author on, but not necessarily an author for a movie, a book about movies. Today we're talking about everyone's favorite topic, fascism. So I want to welcome to the show here, Bruce Kuklick, who is the author of Fascism Comes to America, a century of obsession in politics and culture. Hello, sir. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing fine. I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Could you tell everyone who's not familiar with your work or you personally or has not been a student of yours, kind of what you do and kind of how you came to write this book?
I'm now retired, but I used to be a history professor at the University of Pennsylvania. I did American history, and I guess I would call myself one of the last generalists because I taught everything that you can imagine from what we call contact to the present. And for a long time, with my students in classes, I used to show movies to illustrate things because I found that they were really the most powerful way of getting students interested in things. And I guess I would say that started because my dad used to make home movies. And the most effective thing I did in a classroom was to show a compilation of my old home movies to show these kids how what you think of or what they think of as just their personal lives at some point becomes a part of US history. Uh, and then, so I was always oriented to movies as an important part of American life. But then, and we mentioned this before, Nick, I uh, I got uh, involved in looking at the producers. This terrific Mel Brooks movie from 1967, uh, which was remade as a movie, which had two extended runs on Broadway. And
Hmm.
the second run on Broadway was like 20 years ago, 2000, 2002, something like that.
Hmm.
And my family and I went to see it. And again, I thought, oh my God, what is this genius Mel Brooks doing by taking Adolf Hitler and making a colossal and successful joke out of him?
Hmm.
And that led me to, and this is how historians work, you just kind of get your head around something and then it starts expanding. And that led me to go back to the beginning of the 20th century and to look at Mussolini's politics in Italy, which gave us fascism, and then to see how all of these ideas were, as I would say, refracted in American life. That is how Americans process them.
Hmm.
And what you see is a whole crazy range of things. A lot of very serious movies that show fascism as a threatening thing for the United States, but also a lot of things which kind of make fun of it and joke about it. And to put them all together was a really tough job for me, and that's what the book is about. And even now, I think to myself, as I said to you earlier, I don't have any explanation of a lot of this stuff. You see different groups of people doing different things. You see so many different expressions of what is called fascism, so many reactions to it. Uh, but still, when I come back to everything, the producers is still my hero. Mel Brooks is still my hero. And so is Zero Mostel, who plays the lead in the movie.
Yeah, no, and that Mel Brooks to me has always been a genius because he has done what few filmmakers do, which is he has dabbled always in comedy, but in various genres of film through, he's made silent movies.
Right.
He's satirized Hitchcock films. He's done the Errol Flynn Robin Hood type of movie. He's done science fiction with
Yeah.
Spaceballs, and he always has the tongue in cheek aspect to it, and the producers is no different, and it's, you know, it's his take on Broadway. Even more recently, they did a this was a few years ago, but they even did an entire season of Curb Your Enthusiasm with Larry David, where he was to play the Zero Mostel you know, part as well, and that was really fun, especially as he kept going through co-stars because he kept mucking up. And so yeah, it really, I had an opportunity to skim the book. The interview came together pretty quick, so which was great. But it only gave me a little bit to skim the book, and it is hard to cover almost 120 odd years of history. Um, in one sitting. But you spend a lot of time looking at all sorts of media when it comes to the rise of fascism, especially how it was received in America. You have a lot of obviously books that were authored about it. You talk a little bit about, you know, cherry pick from Gatsby. You cherry pick from you know, a lot of essay, you know, political and otherwise essays, and obviously movies. What to you do you feel are like, what movies were the most widely known or little known that depict the American fear of fascism coming to the US over that course of time?
Well, you start out in the 1930s in the middle of the Depression, when Hitler takes over Germany, uh, and there's two movies, in fact, basically bankrolled by William Randolph Hearst. One called Gabriel in the White House, which is a weird film about a corrupt president who wakes up, and he's a good fascist. He abolishes Congress. He makes war on all the bad guys successfully and creates a dictatorship in the United States, but everything is hunky dory. And then a year later, there was another movie called The President Vanishes, which is about how whoops, have I lost you?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay.
I'm here. I am just quietly listening.
Okay. Okay. The President Vanishes
Yep.
is about how the president foils a fascist plot to take over in the United States. So even in the early 1930s, when this stuff is becoming big headlines, there are opposed notions of what fascism means. There's a very famous early Humphrey Bogart movie called Black Legion, which is about the Black Legion, which was actually uh, what would I call it? A small nativist movement in the Midwest, which didn't go anywhere, but which got some headlines for a time. And then there's if you want, I would call Citizen Kane one of these movies which makes fun of William Randolph Hearst, but calls him at one point a fascist and shows him meeting with Hitler, which actually he did too. I think that if we get into the more recent period, I think of Broderick Crawford in All the King's Men, where he plays this guy Huey, a mock-up of this guy Huey Long, who was a senator from Louisiana. One of my favorite movies is Frederick March, Burt Lancaster, Kirk Douglas movie called 7 Days in May. And if you and your audience have not seen it, I would urge you to see it. It's a very, very interesting, powerful movie with Burt Lancaster playing the bad guy, as it turns out. There are the other thing that I found really interesting, and I go back a step here. One of the things I do is compare communism to fascism in this in the book, and what you see is really interesting. We fought the Cold War for almost 50 years. They the Russians finally just imploded, went downhill. We fought the Nazis for 5 years at best, and we completely destroyed Germany and Nazi Germany. So you'd think in the public imagination, communism would loom much, much more than does fascism. Not true.
Yeah,
Fascism wins hands down. I don't know. You're going to ask me why?
I was gonna say, what do you attribute? Yeah, what do you attribute
Right.
that to? Because
Well,
you're absolutely right. And
uh,
it seems like the further we get away from the 1940s
yes,
when we
yes,
fought the Nazis, the depiction of how we look at them in the media seems to get almost more, at times more sinister, but it also at times more ridiculous. I mean, we have
yes,
movies,
exactly right.
that are serious, like, we have a Saving Private Ryan, or something like that.
Yes,
And then we'll follow that up with Nazis on the moon in a movie called like Iron Sky or Dead
yes,
Snow with
yes,
zombie
right,
Nazis.
yeah,
It's interesting. I think a lot of people of my generation, especially when Trump started kind of getting, his footing in politics and stuff like
yeah,
that. And we saw the rise of what people were comparing as Nazi, fascism, Nazism, or, any that kind of the rhetoric, I guess, started to become
yeah,
more popular. I think
yes,
a lot
yeah,
of us said the same thing all at one time. Nazis again? I thought we finished
right.
this.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I did see in your book that you actually went to great pains to not specifically define fascism.
right.
You wanted to kind of leave it up to the reader because it is such a capital F, small f kind of thing. And because fascism, and from what Mussolini did, is completely, I mean, not complete, but it's different than, small f fascism, and also Marxism, communism, etc. I mean, these are all, they might have relative meanings, but not the same at all.
Yeah, what I would say is one of the things one of the, it's not what I'm going to say, I'm saying it. Uh, what I do in the book is try to say to the reader, you judge for yourself. But
Yeah.
here is 100 years worth of this slinging around with this word. And it really does not have much of what I would call a uh, descriptive meaning or a cognitive meaning. It's
Mm-hmm.
all about people's feelings, and they're projecting their deepest fears in some way or another onto something else. It's a way of derogating. It's a way of, do you mind if I do? You can cut this. It's
Yeah.
a way of going like this.
Yeah. No, and
Okay,
that's okay.
that's
We swear here. We're good. But you're
okay.
right. You're right. I mean,
That's
it's,
that's what it's about.
I,
And the,
fascism has become less of a movement and more of a slur in a
yeah,
way. Um,
that's the argument. That's one of the arguments. The other argument is that there what becomes a slur, but it also becomes this incredibly funny slur. I mean, we talked a little about the producers, which is
yeah.
my favorite, but it has a long history before it. And I don't know how much the people who you deal with go back in time to look at movies, but Duck Soup
Yeah.
is the first.
Yep. And banned
Duck
in Italy
banned in
because,
Italy
yep.
because and it came out. What Groucho Marx said is, "I'm just trying to make a funny film," but he
Yep.
damn well knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
It comes out on the anniversary of Mussolini's being in power in Italy for
Mm-hmm.
10 years. And right away, it's banned there. But it, it's banned because he makes Mussolini look like a fool.
Yep.
Uh, he, Groucho himself, plays the dictator
Dictator. Yep.
or leader of this tiny little country, which decides to go to war against another country
Mm-hmm.
because because Groucho feels his girlfriend has been dissed by the leader of the other country, and it's very
It's the
very
first
funny.
rap battle.
Yeah, right. And then there's people always talk about Charlie Chaplin's
Yep.
movie, The Great
Great
Dictator,
dictator. Yeah.
which has some great scenes in it with a foolish looking Hitler and a foolish looking Mussolini.
Yeah.
But for my money, there's another movie which didn't get that much play at the time called To Be or Not to Be, which has Jack Benny playing two, two different, one Nazi and one anti-Nazi, and has some foolish guy playing made up as Hitler. And it is another riot, but
Mm-hmm.
it's also about the German bombing and destruction of Poland when the war started in 1939. So you're put in a position of saying, of looking at this horror, Hitler, and yet standing back and laughing at him. And it's the same kind of thing that I think you get much later in the producers, but that you see over and over again. Uh, and as I say, it's very puzzling. Uh,
There's
go
a
on, Nick.
a couple of things about it that it brings to light is that the more you satirize or make fun of a certain ideology or whatever, right or wrong, for whomever it is, does it become be taken less serious to people where to the point where, oh, they're no threat, they're just buffoons, they're idiots, they're whatever, and then that's how it kind of sneaks up on you. And is that kind of where we are as a culture now, where we have had since the 1940s and slightly before to think of Nazis, think of communism, Marxism, all these isms as being, well, it's no threat to the great democracy. So when it snuck in because we didn't take it seriously, now we have to deal with it again.
Uh,
Um, yeah.
what I guess what I'd say is that we certainly have a lot of things to worry about in the
Yeah.
United States. But I think thinking of them in 1940s terms
Yeah.
is a bad way to do it, because that's going to lead you off into all sorts of uh, byways that may or may not be relevant to the the 21st century. In fact, I just wrote this to somebody. It's, we retired the N word
Yeah.
because it was inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
And my own view, and I don't push this on the reader because the whole idea is to present this stuff to the reader and say, you make up your own mind. But my mind is made up in the sense that I would say, let's just retire this word. Uh, Now that's not going to happen because it is, so completely embedded. And
Yeah.
you asked before, why do you think fascism triumphed in the public mind over communism? The only explanation I can give you is the iconography, the
Yeah.
way this stuff looks, the swastika, the red and the black.
The Hugo Boss suits.
Yeah, there is something about the way these guys look
Mm-hmm.
that just transfixes us. That
Mm-hmm.
uh, I mean, you go see Joe Biden or Donald Trump today, and they're wreathed in American flags, right? But
Right.
they had nothing on the Nazis. If you go see uh, their public meetings, you can see all this stuff on YouTube. The flagging is just absolutely,
Stories high.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean,
stories.
it's,
So
and they still do some similar things in China or North Korea or
yeah,
something like that
yeah,
because it's pageantry
yes,
and
yes.
yeah.
There's
It-
something about, oh, let's call it pageantry. It's a good word. Is There's something compelling about it for people, and
mhm,
the way the Nazis did it was brilliant, genius.
mhm.
Uh, Now it also brought about their absolute downfall, but it's amazing how successful it was in keeping that vision of the 1940s in front of us in all sorts of ways.
Now, I know you mentioned it a little bit in the book, but not. I was wondering in your research, did you at all look at the rise of fascism? Obviously we made movies, we made television, we made
Yeah.
cartoons, we did everything to combat propaganda that we thought was being aimed at us. But then did you do a lot of research or any research into the movies or content that was being aimed not only at us but at the folks that were Nazis, I guess the German populace or the
Uh,
Axis populace. I mean, obviously they had Leni Riefenstahl, they had,
Right.
they had people who were masters of propaganda, they had filmmakers of their own, they were putting out their own content. Did you get a chance to kind of look at those, to do
Yeah,
any type of
yeah.
comparison as to
I
the
looked at this.
hero villain complex as well that
Yeah,
kind of comes out of that?
yeah. Uh, there's a lot of interesting stuff. It mainly the Nazis, so far as they could penetrate the United States, were most successful in the German-speaking parts of New York City,
Hmm.
and then to a much lesser extent in some places in the Midwest, which had a lot of German immigrants.
Yeah.
But the main place are substantial numbers of people in New York, and they get German films imported. They get Leni Riefenstahl, for example, all the time. But they also get other films which portray the Germans not entirely unfairly, uh, as the guys who got their butts kicked after World War One, and were just trying to get back on their feet. Now, of course, they had to do some, things that Americans might not like all the time, but uh, but for the most part, this propaganda says, uh, the Germans were justified in the revolution in Europe that they were creating in the late 30s, early 40s. Uh, and you might, if your viewers haven't seen this, the high point of all this stuff is a meeting that the German American Bund, which were a bunch of Nazis,
Hmm.
uh, had at Madison Square Garden in 1939. They had this huge meeting. Uh, and there was a documentary made of it a couple of years ago called A Night at the Garden, which won the best short documentary. You can also look at it on YouTube, and that is amazing again because of what these homegrown American German Nazis did was to create in Madison Square Garden this huge panoply of the swastika next to the American flag. And their argument was that Nazism was good Americanism.
Hmm.
And they have all this pageantry. They also have these goose stepping guys, and what did you call them?
Oh, the
The
Hugo Boss suits and
Yeah,
the
Hugo
the
Boss
Adidas
too.
boots.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
boots and insignia and
Yeah.
everything like that. And I've watched that half a dozen times at least, and it's still amazing to me uh, how these guys grasp the visual impact of what they were doing. I mean, it really is an interesting phenomenon.
I mean, there's a lot into, if you're ever interested at all in American culture, you look at a little bit of the psychology of this kind of stuff, and some of it is people just want to be part of something. Some of it is they want to
Yes.
feel patriotic, and this is their way of getting that. I haven't heard. I've heard the word patriot more times in my life in the last 10 years than
Yes.
I had. The last time I heard the word patriot before Trump was when we were bombing someone using Patriot missiles. That was it. And before that, never Patriots Day, I think
Uh,
we have, and that's it. And I live up in Massachusetts. I'm in the Northeast. We have, a lot of what stupid white man colonizer holidays up here. And it's, we're very celebratory. We have, we have a lot of
yeah. No,
shipyards and stuff
absolutely.
here. This is an area that patriotism tends to flourish. But it's weird that it, you seem to see that it concentrated more, the rise of kind of alt-right or whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it at this point. You see those areas concentrated in places where education is not a priority, let's call it. You see it in places of some things that are a little bit of a poorer area, areas that are that just, there's something about it, but they seem to be consistent. Florida, Arizona, it's really interesting. But yeah, it's weird because we all watch the same movies, we all consume the same
Yeah.
media.
Yes,
So
that's
where
correct.
is the disconnect? Because it can't just be that that guy watches Fox News, that guy watches CNN.
Right.
That can't
Yeah,
be the only difference.
right.
There has to be more. Some of it, I think, is, and this comes again from living up here, from the 80s. There were people, when you talk to them, they said, oh, and if it ever did come up, because remember, it was thought untoward to discuss politics or
Yes,
religion or
yes,
anything
that's
else
right.
for a
That's right.
while,
Yeah.
and now that's all we talk about.
That's what
But yeah,
my mother used to say, three things, Bruce, you don't discuss in company: sex, religion, and politics. And
right.
now that's all you talk about.
Yeah, exactly. So, we have a situation where, I remember growing up in the 80s, and people would say, I voted for Reagan. Oh, why'd you vote for Reagan? I'm a Republican. Okay, well, why are you a Republican? Well, because my father is.
Yeah,
His father is. And for no other reason. Now the line has become a little bit blurred. It just, like, I think when people talk about fascism, people talk about any sort of ideology. I think that the line is blurred because definitions are blurred.
yeah, that's
Do you kind of feel that way a
yes,
little bit?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things that again, this is one of the things I allow my reader to infer
Right.
from what I say, is a lot of this is not rational. It starts in your gut and then it gets to your head.
Mm-hmm.
And how that happens and why it starts in your gut, I wish I knew,
Yeah.
which is one of the reasons I think the humorous aspects of, at least when you're talking about fascism,
Sure.
uh, are so interesting to me. And it occurs to me, and I don't know if it's a good segue, Nick,
Sure.
but I don't know if you know the movie Untergang, which is about the last days in Hitler's bunker.
Oh yeah.
This is a very serious movie. And what has happened is that there are a couple of it's a movie about the last days of Hitler in his bunker under Berlin, when the whole thing comes crashing
Yeah.
down and actually he kills himself at the end. Uh, but
Spoiler alert. No kidding.
at any rate, uh, there is there's one scene when Hitler goes berserk in front of his closest associates and gives them a message in German about how everybody else is to blame for what's happened, but
Yeah.
not him. And these two scenes got ripped out of their original context, and there's now a group of hundreds of little chunks on YouTube called the Hitler parodies.
Yeah.
And you can do your I've done a couple myself, but if you look at these parodies, you people, I mean, it's just amazing the kinds of things they put into his mouth and the jokes they make and the serious propositions that they put forward. And there's even a website about the Hitler parodies. What does this mean? What does this mean about the German language? What does this mean about translation into English? What does this mean about our culture? And if you really, well, you spend a couple of days looking at it. But if you really want to get a contemporary sense of this thing, the movie was made in 2004, but they're still doing these parodies 15, 20 years later. Um, that's a really good place to start for people who are interested, because you get a sense of all the movies and everything that's been put together about this.
Yeah, I remember one time I was at my grandfather's house, and my grandfather was the one who introduced me to Faulty Towers.
Uh-huh.
And there's an entire episode about Basil Fawlty hits his head and he's a little out of it, and the whole thing is there's Germans coming to the hotel,
Oh, gee.
and the entire joke of it is don't mention the war. And
Uh-huh.
there's, at one point he mentions the war. He's literally doing a Hitler mustache goose step up and down the thing. And he's like, "Don't mention the war. I mentioned it once, but I think I got away with it." And it's that it's and that has always been an image to stay with me. The downfall, Hitler banging his thing while
Yeah,
he's
yeah, yeah,
blaming everyone in the room. When they, that Tom Cruise movie Valkyrie, when they made
yeah,
Valkyrie about the
yes,
assassination attempt on Hitler.
yes,
I
yeah, yeah.
myself, I wrote a novella about a time traveler whose idea, his the point of the book is a comedy. Oddly enough, it's a comedy about a time traveler who is assigned to go back in time to kill Hitler, because that's everyone's
Oh,
favorite
yeah,
party question is, if you could
yes,
go back in time and kill Hitler, would you?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so I try to answer that question: is if this guy goes back in time to go kill Hitler, what happens? And of course, he messes it all up, and it's a whole thing.
yeah. Uh-huh.
But at the end, you come to the conclusion that things need to happen in a way that they happen so that we learn from them.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I feel like to some degree they say, the message is in the media, and unfortunately, I think we've lost a little bit of the message over the years. Like it's been garbled. It's like a Xerox, right? When World War II happened
Yeah.
and the
Okay.
bombs were
A good
dropped and
metaphor.
the
Yeah.
Holocaust happened, everything was crystal clear in everyone's mind
Yeah.
that this is bad. Nuremberg trials, The Hague, all these
Yeah.
things. Then years go by. Okay, well, now we have the Cold War. Now we have Vietnam. Now we have Korea. Now we have the conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan,
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
And everything has been diluted going through all of this till now. To we have this, like I said, Xerox copy of a copy of a copy,
Yeah.
where it's
Whispering
like
down the lane too.
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like I was at a film festival about a month ago in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania,
Uh-huh.
and there was
Oh,
a
is that when they do the blob thing?
yeah, yes,
Oh,
yeah, the Colonial Theater.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah. I know that.
So I was at that film
Yeah,
festival.
I'm about 30 minutes now from Phoenixville.
I love that town, by the way. I really enjoyed it. It was very nice, good food. I really enjoyed the atmosphere there.
Yeah.
Good people at the Colonial too.
Yeah.
So I'm there, and they had a documentary that was showing there about a survivor from the Holocaust, David Tuck, and that's another thing too. When it comes to media, um, it allows people to tell stories, not
Uh,
just the stories of grand war, like we said before, Saving Private
yeah.
Ryan or Zero
Yeah.
Dark 30 or something like
Yeah.
that, but personal stories of, it's like a gentleman like this who, survived the Holocaust and wants to talk about it. I had a chance to sit down with David, interview him
Uh,
briefly, and it's sobering, because my way, and I think to some degree this fits into our conversation about humor. My way of dealing with trauma and grief and really heady subjects is humor. And I'm
yeah.
sitting down with this gentleman, I'm like,
Me too.
I can't use humor
Yeah.
here. It just
Yeah.
doesn't
That's
fit.
right. That's correct. Yeah. That's right.
And that to me is weird because of context. It's when it's in your face, it's inappropriate.
Yeah.
If you're seeing it on screen or it's being scripted or acted, it works.
Uh,
And I think that just has something to do with the personal aspect of it as well.
yeah. Yeah.
But the funny thing is, the whole interview was billed to me as, oh, he's 90 something years old, but he's got such a wit and great, and he's got such a sense of humor about it. And I was like, I would love to hear the sense of humor part. By the way, I was lied to about that, but that's okay. No, it's fine. I really enjoy conversations with folks like yourself about this, because I think, I mean, books are media to some degree, and well, they are. I mean, not even to some degree, they
Yeah.
flat out
Yeah.
are.
Yeah.
It's just consumed differently than movies, and I like that you kind of put that together in your classes. Um, was there one movie or another that you showed your students back when you were teaching that you found worked better than others? Like the one that kept their attention better, instead of just going in there going, it's movie day.
Uh, yeah, there was. And this gets us a little away from fascism, but that's all right.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, the movie that won, I think it was in the 1946 Academy Award, The Best Years of Our Lives.
Uh-huh.
It's a movie with Frederick March, Dana Andrews, and it's about these three vets who come back from the war. All have different war backgrounds, and they go back to their Midwestern city and try to start their lives over again. And it shows you what happens to these guys. It's a little long from my perspective now, but it is a hell of a movie. I mean, you just sit there and it puts you into what it was like. And part of that was done because one of these three vets was actually a real veteran who had lost his hands in the war. I mean, had them burned off. And he actually got an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor that year. But maybe it's because of the realism of this guy, the part that this guy is taking.
Mm-hmm.
But as you say, you don't laugh at it. And uh, all that was on me. But what was amazing for me is that I was able to show this over and over and over again to my students and have them, you know, come out. I won't say they were transformed by spending 2.5 hours watching a movie,
Mm-hmm.
but they certainly thought about it seriously.
And I do believe in film as being a transformative experience. I mean, I know that
Hands down.
a sobering movie for me I watched years ago is Johnny Get Your Gun. You
Yeah.
know, about the gentleman, the soldier who, you know, and Metallica did a song about it. You know, which
Wow.
has got, you know, eyes blown out, ears blown out, no arms,
Yeah.
no legs,
Yeah.
just this
Yeah.
hunk of meat in a
Yeah.
hospital bed.
Yeah.
You know, that was, you know, a sobering movie. And, you
Yeah.
know, when
Yeah.
you kind of are going through the internal narrative to the person and their
Yeah.
struggle to
Yeah.
communicate and all that. Um, how did entertainment become so vital in displaying what fascism is to the American public?
Well, this is I might have said this earlier, but I'll say it again because
Mhm.
book has gotten me a little trouble with some of my academic colleagues because the argument I make in it, and it's quite clear, is that if you want to understand how the American people felt about fascism, and it felt in different ways over the last 100 years, what you have to do is look at the media and particularly the film. It's entertainment that gets to people. The tons and tons of written academic discussion uh, amount to something, but they have nowhere near the impact on the general consciousness of Americans as do movies. Uh, there was a very famous anti-Nazi film made in 1939 called Confessions of a Nazi Spy. And it was the uh, one anti-Nazi movie made at that time that I spent a lot of time trying to figure out its importance in people's heads. And this stuff is not physics or math. I mean, you can't nail it down that way. But it was made at the same time as the Munich conference uh, took place. Now, the Munich conference is a big, important conference. All sorts of historians have written about it, knowing about it. It's when the British and the French get together and basically decide to appease Hitler, saying, okay, you can do what you want. And Hitler does, because they think that he will be controlled and that he will act responsibly. He doesn't.
We've heard that
Scholars,
before.
yeah, scholars have written tons and tons of books about this. But if you look at what I can figure out, and as I said, it's not math, the movie really made a far bigger difference to Americans in getting it into their heads that they can't trust these goddamn Germans. So it's not the actual politics and scholars' discussion of politics that's crucial. It's the film, it's the media. Now, there are I mean, Broadway is important, novels are important, but I think of all those things, I mean, the movies just stick out to me as being this powerful, powerful source of public communication.
Mhm.
And the movie makers knew that. I'll give you another example, which for me was a lot of fun because I've become a big Errol Flynn fan.
Yeah.
in the late 30s, Hollywood made a, a real run of pictures, not about Germany, not about the United States, but about ancient times when a real good guy beats up on a bad guy.
Yep.
Biggest example is
Robin Hood.
Earl Flynn and Robin Hood.
Yep.
That is an anti-Nazi movie. Jack Warner, who was the studio head at Warner Brothers and who made it, basically said, "I want every kid who sees that movie to know that, well, then King John, who was the bad guy, Robin Hood's enemy, that King John is Hitler or Mussolini in disguise, and that Errol Flynn is ultimately the United States coming to the rescue of these people." So, and then Errol Flynn made his career on that movie, and there were a couple of others that he made right at the same time. But
But you're right. I mean, you look at a movie like that, Mark of Zorro. There's a
yes,
lot of those movies that,
Marcus Zorro is another one. That's
yeah, all came out around the same time, and it was basically. But I think that that's also a lot. That's, I mean, it's no different than Roy Rogers running in with with Trigger and
yeah.
you know
There's some anti-Nazi films that have Roy Rogers in them.
yep.
That he fights Nazis somewhere in California or wherever he and Trigger are running around.
It's funny that there's it is our media is tends to go, whether it's television, news, even or narrative like film. We tend to have a real good guy versus bad guy mentality as a country, and maybe as a world we do. I think there needs to be someone to blame or someone to differentiate good from bad from, and it's really pronounced in Hollywood or in the film industry.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me specifically in America because it's not like film only exists in America. Film exists in India. Bollywood is huge.
Yeah.
That China, China, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam. A lot of them have. There's a lot of film coming out of there. The Philippines has a vibrant film scene as well,
Yeah.
and it's weird that to me that there's all of these movies that are to some degree jingoistic, kind of not propaganda, but very bordering on propaganda that America will put out about American forces going in, doing the thing, and fighting the bad guy, and other countries don't seem to make the same kind of movies. There are still oppressed versus oppressor. I do find that to be a common theme, but I don't necessarily see the real good versus evil predilection towards one or the other. I mean, conflict is conflict, right? But I see in Americans movies, it's real white hat, black hat, and that's it. No shade of gray. Do you find that to be kind of true from your just general watching or research?
Trying to think about some.
I know that question was a little all over the place, and I apologize.
I'm trying to think of a counter example to you where it's much more subtle, but it's not. I mean, it's uh, the
I mean,
Robert.
even something like Avatar, right? We have a whole new Avatar
I
movie
was
coming
going to
out.
think of Avatar,
Yeah,
but I was thinking about the Robert Redford movie. Uh, what's the beautiful girl he falls in love with in that? Uh,
that's any movie. That's any Robert Redford movie. Now,
well,
I think it's in
the
his
way we
contract.
were. It's the way we were.
The way we were. Yep.
Yeah, which has she's a pro communist gal,
Yep.
and she's always calling everybody she doesn't like a fascist. Uh, and that movie, I will say, leaves you thinking, God, these two people just couldn't get it on together because they had their political differences, and they just couldn't work it out. So I would say there's my counter example. And I think the most interesting movies are ones that are complicated that way. I would actually argue that Casablanca. Look what
Yeah.
happens in Casablanca. Rick Blaine walks off with the Frenchman, who's the head of the the cops in Casablanca, and he gives up his great girlfriend. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a bittersweet, not black or white aspect to that. So I would say, if you want to make money with a movie, your best chance is to go black and white. But
Yeah.
I would also say there are enough gray movies that have done well. Uh, but that, and this, we haven't talked about this, Nick. Uh, we haven't talked about cartoons. And I
Yeah.
mean,
We
and
talked about a
because,
little bit off, well, I say off camera, but yeah,
yeah,
you're right.
uh, the cartoons, which we no longer, I mean, you have feature length Disney cartoons, but you no longer have the cartoons that went along with the playbill. I mean, you'd have
Mhm.
a double feature, you'd have a news feature, the movie tone news, and you'd always have a cartoon. Uh, and during the war, some of the most effective uh, pieces of propaganda that Hollywood again launched against the Germans
Mhm.
were their cartoons, and there are loads of them.
Yep.
There are two I put down here, which your viewers might. I think they're both again. They can get them on YouTube. One called the Ductators, which
Daffy Duck, right?
which makes fun of them. And
Yep.
then there's the one that really strikes me is one called Der Fuhrer's Face, which is about Donald Duck wakes up one morning, he's having a dream and he doesn't know it, and he thinks he's in Nazi land, it's called, where you get all of this, these graphics with the Germans and everything like that. And the reason it's called the Fuhrer's Face is that it shows the Nazis for whom Donald is slaving away, marching around, and they've all got swastikas on their butts, and they're all farting, and that's why it's called the Fuhrer's face. You know, and it's absolutely hilarious. It's the farce of fascism. But God, Hollywood, they knew what to do to get
Yep.
to get at these guys. And
Yeah.
the interesting thing is that Joseph Goebbels, who was the propaganda minister and who was making all these pro-German, obviously, movies during the war, a lot of which I've seen, and which are pretty good, he could not get over it that the United States did such a good job. With the exception of Leni Riefenstahl, he thought Americans did it better. And he was horrified that from his point of view, American propaganda was so powerful via Hollywood.
Yeah, I remember growing up myself, and it was after school. Tom and Jerry was on,
Yeah,
and Tom and Jerry was always very. Again, it is very cat and mouse, and
yeah,
all
yeah,
that. So it's black hat, white hat again. But they would often use iconography and stuff like that. One was a Nazi, one was whatever.
yeah,
There was a lot of that. There was obviously a lot of the Looney Tunes stuff, Daffy Duck stuff like that. Disney got into it a little bit. Yeah, Disney now is obviously, I think they've shuffled more into social issues, but they were very much used to hit very hard on Nazism and
uh-huh, uh-huh,
fascism and stuff like that. Especially through some of their stuff they did, the black and white stuff, even during the
uh-huh.
50s and
Yeah,
60s.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I did you. I had a question for this, and I kind of am blanking a little bit, but that's okay.
Leave blank. Let me add one thing uh, about the propaganda in the 40s, and that is that the Americans did borrow Leni Riefenstahl and her techniques to make their own propaganda films. So there was, even during the war, when there's no diplomatic interchange, uh, these countries are borrowing from one another. There's a whole series of films. Frank Capra made this series, which came out, was first shown, I think there are 5 or 6 of them that were shown at first to American troops, and then they made it to your home screens, called Why We Fight. And if you still watch them today, and they are very, very effective because they blend Leni Riefenstahl's techniques with those of American filmmakers. And that's a wallop that you can't really uh, beat, I would say. It's once you get into this, you never reach the bottom. It's wonderful. My wife gets annoyed at me because every night for 2 hours I shut down and start watching various kinds of videos.
See,
So,
I have always said, that when a man reaches a certain age, you only have two paths. You either end up watching sports or you end up watching history.
yeah,
And the History Channel or 30 for 30s on
yeah.
ESPN. That's it.
Uh,
We know which direction you went. Um, I haven't quite hit that age yet. I'm
so
still
I'm a big Philadelphia sports fan. So don't take that away from me now.
okay. We will go Birds then. Okay,
Yeah,
we'll go
that's
for the
right.
Eagles. That's fine.
Yeah.
No, so talk to me a little bit about where can people get the book?
The book, well, the book is done so it's just out. It's been out for 10 days.
Oh,
Whoops.
yeah,
Well,
that's okay. There we go. It
yeah.
compensates. I was
Uh,
just sitting in the dark with you.
uh, the book has been out for 10 days. It's out from the University of Chicago Press, which has really done a terrific job, done a lot of advertising. It's called Fascism Comes to America, a century of uh, a century of obsession in culture and politics. They can go to their local bookstore, they can order it from Amazon, and I make a little money off each one, but I'm not concerned about that. What I'm most concerned about is getting this message out and getting people interested in it, because it's a fascinating topic. And also, I mean, I gotta say, I mean, you do this, I just do this part-time, you do it all the time. uh, just getting them interested in film as this massively important way of communicating to people.
Well, I mean,
Can't be
if you
beat.
look at social media, the platforms that do best with the younger generation are the video facing platforms. So TikTok,
Uh,
YouTube,
yeah,
Instagram to some
yeah,
degree.
yeah,
They want to be entertained because they want to see what people are doing. They want to interact with them. They want to feel like they're part of it. And I think movies, because of the way that they are written sometimes as you put yourself in the position of the protagonist, or hopefully not the antagonist, but you put yourself in the movie mentally, that's where it grabs you. And yeah, now I think that there's no surprise to me that a group of people on TikTok can shut down a presidential, you know,
yeah,
rally or something like that by buying out or
yeah,
reserving all of the
yeah,
tickets because they
yeah,
said screw this. Like that
yeah.
that is as effective as any rally at the Madison Square Garden,
Yes,
and it
yeah,
was done by people, not even just American kids. Like that was done from a worldwide, just we support
uh,
this.
uh,
I
uh,
found that to be, from an entertainment perspective, fascinating,
yeah,
from a news
yeah,
perspective,
yeah,
fascinating.
yeah.
um I want to thank you for coming on. And I won't take up too much more of your time, but thank you so much for coming on and talking with us. Anytime I get a chance to speak with an educator, former educator, I really enjoy the conversation. I and especially when I can work in film or things that I appreciate and enjoy, and obviously you do as well. I appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Well, you tell your viewers too, if they want to get in touch with me, I'm more than happy to talk about these things with them.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, and I think that's yeah, I think that keeping the conversation, especially something like this, is really important because again, as definitions become blurry and changed, I think that it's important to understand whether or not the rhetoric doesn't matter, the history does.
Yeah, I'll buy that. Well, thank you, Nick. It's been
Thank you,
a
sir.
pleasure. It really has.
Pleasure.
Take care.